I've been sitting in the Pennsylvania State Archives in Harrisburg for 5 hours going through Lancaster County farm records, and I need to tell you what I found. What I found in a Pennsylvania Agricultural History Project field guide from 2009 changes everything you think you know about home cooling. 54 to 56 degrees. That number sat there, quietly, buried in a description of root cellars and below frost storage spaces used across rural Pennsylvania. Not 72 degrees, not 68, 54 to 56. Stable, year-round, no compressor, no refrigerant, no monthly payment. I kept reading. The same files led into older county records, barn studies, and farmhouse surveys. Vaulted cellars, spring houses, banked foundations, air paths cut through stone and soil. Storage rooms built into hillsides. The same pattern kept repeating. Different builders, different decades, same result. 54 to 56 degrees. You need to hold that number for a minute. Because that number is not a thermostat setting. It is not a paid utility service. It is not a machine rating. It is the temperature the Earth itself was already offering before anyone sold you a compressor to imitate it. That is what makes this dangerous. If the ground below your yard already sits in the 50s beyond frost depth, then a large part of modern cooling has been framed backward. Not completely, but backward enough to matter. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you a 3-ton condenser. And the archive got stranger. The Pennsylvania file described root cellars as spaces that exploit the constant temperature below frost level, around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the exact language. It sat in plain sight, public, indexed, unhidden, and still absent from almost every conversation you have ever had about cooling a house. That knowledge never disappeared. It was written out of the manual. It was waiting. Then I pulled a second stack. Extension material. Farm context studies, notes on cool storage, notes on dairy processing, notes on spring-fed structures, not luxury systems, survival systems. Built where cash was tight and summers were hot, built because families needed food to keep and rooms to stay usable, built because stone, water, shade, and earth did not send invoices. So here is the claim. A buried air tunnel, built with the right depth, slope, pipe, drainage, and filtration, can pull brutal summer air toward the same 54 to 56 degree thermal mass the old Pennsylvania cellars were using all along. Not magic, not folklore, physics, cheap physics, durable physics. The kind that keeps working after the warranty language on your mechanical system is gone. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago and you've never done this before. It works in town. In this video, I am going to show you why a ground-coupled air path costing $324 to $478 can pre-cool incoming summer air using the same temperature band hidden in those old farm records. Stay with me, because what I found in Lancaster County uses the same physics the Persians used to cool desert air 3,300 years ago. Here's what the evidence shows, and here's why nobody was supposed to find it. The modern field calls this ground coupling. The United States Department of Energy says shallow Earth stays between 40 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit all year. That matters. Once you get below the daily heat swings and below frost depth, soil becomes a thermal battery. It changes slowly. Air changes fast. When hot air moves through a buried pipe, heat leaves the air and enters the cooler surrounding ground. Your house feels the result. Think about a car radiator. The radiator is not making cold. It is moving heat somewhere else. This system does the same thing in reverse. The earth is the radiator, the pipe is the path. The fan, if you use one, only nudges the air forward. Natural Resources Canada says an earth-to-air thermal exchanger works by preheating winter air and pre-cooling summer air through the surrounding soil. Their design guide gives the numbers builders care about. Bury the tube at least 1.5 meters deep. Expect little added benefit after 3.5 meters. Keep the run long enough to exchange heat. Around 34 meters gets most of the temperature change. Design is everything. The guide also says use smooth inner walls, keep a minimum 2% slope, and control condensate. That is why the old systems lasted. Water had somewhere to go, dirt stayed outside, air kept moving. The people who built them were not guessing. And the performance gap is the whole story. In practical terms, you are using roughly 45 to 60 watts of fan power to access a huge underground heat sink that never asks to be recharged. Call that an equivalent coefficient of performance many times higher than a box fan and with no compressor at all. The closest modern cousin is the geothermal heat pump, which the Department of Energy rates by coefficient of performance because the Earth is doing most of the heavy work. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, refrigerant, financing, and service every year. And that is why you have never heard of this. I went to Strasburg in Lancaster County in late July. The road was white with glare. The fields shimmered. Cicadas were screaming from the trees. Then I stepped inside. The little stone outbuilding sat half into the slope behind a farmhouse. The air changed in 2 steps. First cool, then still. I could hear water. I could not hear machinery. No condenser hum. No vent roar. No vibration through the floorboards. Only dripping stone and a low draft moving past my wrist. Eli stood beside the doorway. He tapped the wall and told me, "You use the hill first." Then he smiled and pointed to the vent path cut through the shaded side. His family had used the same idea for 4 generations. His people came from the Palatinate, then into Pennsylvania, and they kept building what worked instead of what sold well. That line stayed with me. Not because it sounded old, because it sounded exact. Use the hill first. That is the whole principle. A 2009 Pennsylvania Agricultural History Project Field Guide, built from county farm records, says root cellars in rural Pennsylvania exploited the constant 50 to 55 degree temperature below frost level. The document came late, the practice came first. Go back further and the pattern gets bigger. In Yazd, Persian builders paired wind catchers with underground water channels and cooled rooms with moving air and earth-tempered mass. The Dalatabad garden wind catcher still rises about 33 meters. Air drops through the tower, moves over cooler subterranean moisture, and enters the interior already tamed. The Romans knew it too. They buried storage, thickened masonry, and used below-grade spaces where summer heat simply could not swing as fast. In the American Southwest, indigenous builders sank living spaces into the earth because soil flattened the day's brutal temperature curve. Different language, different tools, same answer. The Koreans learned it from the floor. Ondol systems ran heat through stone and mass so indoor temperature changed slowly and predictably. That is the principle again. Use earth and mass to delay extremes. Make the building cooperate with physics before you ask fuel to rescue it. Every civilization that mastered extreme heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from the Palatinate to Pennsylvania 300 years ago and kept building it because it worked and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. The breakpoint came in 1932. Carrier released the room weather maker for smaller homes after reorganizing as Carrier Corporation in 1931. From that moment on, a house cooled by soil, shade, and masonry threatened a residential machine market that would become enormous. The mechanism was quieter. In 1940, Willis H. Carrier, Rialto E. Churn, and Walter A. Grant published Modern Air Conditioning, Heating, and Ventilating. It became the language of the trade. Comfort was now something you manufactured, measured, ducted, serviced, and replaced. The house stopped being the machine became the house. Then, the standards hardened. After sick building failures and indoor air quality fights, buried air paths became suspect unless every detail was engineered and documented. By 2021, the International Mechanical Code required outdoor intake openings to maintain strict separation from contaminant sources, including 1-0-foot horizontal distances and below-grade exposure rules that complicate earth-coupled intake design. Some caution was justified. Bad tubes do fail. Poor drainage grows mold. Bad seals invite soil gas. But the effect was clear. The systems ordinary people once built with stone, slope, and judgment became specialty exceptions. The Allies were real. Movie palaces and department stores sold cooled air as modern luxury. Congress gave Carrier priceless legitimacy when the House received air conditioning in 1928 and the Senate followed in 1929 under the banner of manufactured weather. After 1930, General Motors and DuPont scaled Freon through kinetic chemical while companies like Carrier sold the hardware that used it. Prestige, chemistry, and hardware moved together. And the educational cost was brutal. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building codes, and engineering curricula. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. The pattern never ended. In 2022, the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $964,622 lobbying Washington, according to Open Secrets. In 2023, the U.S. residential HVAC market was valued at $16.43 billion. When code gets more complex, liability grows, and inspectors default to packaged systems, money flows toward replacements, maintenance plans, refrigerant, financing, and branded equipment. That is not an accident. It is a business model. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you a 3-ton condenser. The residential HVAC market in America is worth $16.43 billion a year. Every earth tube installed is a compressor, refrigerant charge, and service contract that never gets sold. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people with a yard, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to buy equipment. You need a yard and a weekend. If your house has 18 to 40 feet of side yard, you already have enough room to test this. 1 trench is enough. Keep it simple. Dig a trench 30 to 34 feet long and 6 to 7 feet deep. Use 1 8-inch smooth wall HDPE or double-walled polyethylene pipe. Keep the top of the tube below the frost line and inside that stable soil band. Give the run a 2% slope. That means a 1/4 inch drop for every foot of length. Water has to leave. At the low end, build a small condensate sump with a 5-gallon basin, washed 3-4-inch gravel, and a clean-out access. At the high end, place the intake hood at least 3 feet above finished grade and at least 10 feet from a driveway, dryer vent, or septic line. Add stainless insect mesh. Add a MERV 1-3 filter box before air enters the pipe. Seal the wall pass-through correctly. Use an 8-inch Schedule 40 PVC sleeve only through the wall, not for the buried air path. Seal that sleeve with an EPDM pipe boot and exterior silicone. Inside, pull air with a 45 to 6 0-watt EC inline duct fan and put a shutoff damper near the entry point. If your room is under 400 square feet, 1 run is enough to prove the concept. Do not cheap out here. Smooth wall HDPE is not optional. Corrugated flex pipe causes standing condensate, dust pockets, and biofilm growth. That is how people build a mold factory and then blame the idea. The old builders understood drainage. You need to understand it too. The money is almost insulting. The buried pipe costs $148 to $196. The inline fan costs $68 to $92. The filter box, hood, mesh, and damper costs $61 to $109. The sleeve, gravel, sealant, cleanouts, and EPDM boot cost $47 to $81. If you dig by hand, the whole build lands between $324 and $478. If you rent a walk-behind trencher for one Saturday morning, add $96 to $148, and the result is immediate. On a 95-degree day, 90 plus air moving through a properly buried run commonly enters the room at 58 to 62 degrees after startup, then steadies as the soil absorbs the load. It never feels like compressor air. It feels heavier, calmer, more stable. That is the point. Maintenance is light. Change the filter once a season, Flush the run with a 3% hydrogen peroxide rinse once a year. Check the cleanout. Retest radon every 2 years. Your central air costs $7,400 to $14,600 to install, $96 to $241 per month to run, and lasts 12 to 18 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $324 to $478 total. It lasts 30 to 50 years. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel, root cellar, cooling, lime wash walls, gravity-fed water, I've put it all in one place. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order families actually use it. I'm building that resource now. But stay here, because what Eli showed me in Strasbourg is the part nobody is talking about yet. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Not for me. For what comes next. Because this is not a channel, this is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state and your highest summer electric bill in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1,946 Penn State document reveals about keeping a pantry cold with nothing but stone, airflow, and hydrated lime, and the report from 1,946 that proves county extension agents knew about it 80 years before telling you to buy another appliance. You're not going to want to miss that one.